Calico Joe Chapter 2. In the summer of 1973, the country was slowly emerging from the trauma of Vietnam, referencing the Vietnam War. Spiro Agnew was in trouble and would eventually go down. Watergate was getting hot, with much more to come. I was 11 years old and slightly aware of what was happening out there in the real world, but I was wonderfully unburdened by it. Baseball was my world, and little else mattered. My father pitched for the New York Mets, and I lived and died with each game. I pitched, too, for the Scrappers in the White Plains Little League, and because my father was who he was, great things were expected of me. I rarely met those expectations, but there were moments of promise. We learned a little bit more about Warren, the narrator's father. We learned that he was a major league pitcher for the New York Mets, and that the narrator, he also was a pitcher in the Little League. By early July, the pennant race in the National League East had settled into a bland contest. All 6 teams, Mets, Pirates, Cardinals, Phillies, Cubs, and Expos, were hovering around a 500 and showing little enthusiasm for making a run. In the West, the Reds and the Dodgers were pulling away. In the American League, the Oakland A's, with their swagger and colorful uniforms and long hair, were looking to repeat their championship of 1972. My buddies and I followed the game religiously. We knew each player and every statistic. We checked every box score, then replayed the games on the sandlots of White Plains. Life at home was not always pleasant, and my escape was on the field. Baseball was my best friend, and in mid-July 1973, the game was about to be electrified like never before. It began quietly enough with a pulled hamstring. The first baseman for the Cubs' AAA affiliate in Wichita went down as he rounded third and headed for home. The next day, Jim Hickman, the first baseman for the Cubs, injured his back. The team suddenly needed someone to play first, so they reached down to their AA club in Midland, Texas, and called up a 21-year-old named Joe Castle. At the time, Castle was hitting a .395 with 20 home runs, 50 RBIs, 40 stolen bases, and only 1 error at first base. He was the hottest player in AA and was creating a buzz. As the story goes, Castle was asleep in the cheap apartment he shared with 4 other minor leaguers when the call came from Chicago. An assistant coach drove him to the airport in Midland, and he caught a flight to Houston, where he waited 2 hours for a flight to Philadelphia. While he waited, he called his family in Arkansas with the thrilling news. When he arrived in Philadelphia, a cab delivered him to the Veterans Stadium, where he was quickly fitted for a uniform, given number 42, and hustled onto the field. The Cubs were already taking batting practice. Understandably, he was nervous, thrilled, almost bewildered, and when the manager, Whitey Lockman, said, "Get loose, you're starting at first and hitting 7th, Castle had trouble gripping his brand new bat. In his first round of Major League batting practice, he swung at the first 2 pitches and missed. So this is exciting, right? This is what everyone dreams about who is on a minor league team getting called up to the majors, and that's what ends up happening for this guy named Joe Castle from Arkansas. And he has like this crazy first day where he travels all day, he arrives at the game, and they're like, all right, warm up, you're going out there. I mean, imagine like the feeling. He would not miss again for a long time. In the dugout before the game, he huddled with Don Kessinger, the Cubs' veteran shortstop and another Arkansas boy. Kessinger had been an All-American in baseball and basketball at Ole Miss and was outgoing and laid back. He managed to keep the kid loose. His only advice was, go up there swinging. The Cubs center fielder was Rick Monday, another veteran who had been born in Batesville, Arkansas, just down the White River from Joe's hometown. Between Kessinger and Monday, Joe managed to survive the worst case of pregame jitters a player could imagine. It was Thursday, July 12th, a day baseball would remember for a long time. The Phillies' pitcher was a lefty, Benny Humphreys, a wild fastballer who walked as many as he struck out. As Joe strolled to the plate in the second inning, he gritted his teeth and again told himself to swing at the first pitch, wherever it happened to be. Humphreys thought the rookie should get introduced to Major League heat and unloaded everything he had. Joe, from the right side, guessed fastball, made perfect contact, and hit a shot that landed 20 rows back in left center field. He sprinted around the bases, much too excited for any kind of victory trot, and was in the dugout being congratulated before he caught his breath. So how exciting is that? It's your first time at bat in the major leagues and you hit a home run. It's pretty impressive, but that's also like a pretty high standard that you are setting for yourself. He was not the first major leaguer to homer on the first pitch he saw. In fact, he was the 11th. 46 homered in their first at bat, 11 on the first pitch. Nonetheless, his name was on the record book. It was now open, and Joe Castle wasn't finished with it. In the fifth inning, Humphrey started off with a fastball high and tight, a brushback meant as a warning, but Joe didn't get the message. He worked the count to 3-1, then yanked a fastball down the left field line, where it barely scraped the inside of the foul pole. The third base umpire was quick to twirl his right index finger, signaling a home run. Joe, who was rounding first and following the ball, kicked into a sprint and slowed slightly as he neared home plate. Now a record belonged only to him and one other. In 1951, Bob Neiman of the St. Louis Browns homered in his first 2 major league at-bats. So imagine that. You get up again, it's your second time ever to bat in the major leagues, you hit another home run. The Mets were playing the Braves in Atlanta that night, and the game was not on television. I was in Tom Sabatani's basement listening to Lindsey Nelson, the Mets' wonderful play-by-play announcer, who informed us of what had just happened in Philadelphia. It didn't take much to get Lindsey excited. "He tied a record, folks," he said. "Think of the thousands of young men who've played this game, and only 2 have homered in their first 2 at-bats." "I wonder if he can do it 3 times, added Ralph Kinnery, the Hall of Famer slugger and Lindsey's sidekick. The Cubs chased Humphreys in the 6th, and the Phillies brought in a middle reliever, a right-hander named Tip Gallagher. When Joe left the on-deck circle in the top of the 7th, the score was tied 4-4, and the Phillies fans, always vocal, were silent. There was no applause, just curiosity. To their surprise, Joe dug in from the left side. Since there was no scouting report, the Phillies did not know he was a switch hitter. So he hit his first 2 home runs right from the right side, and now his 3rd time up at bat, he's starting from the left side. So they didn't have any scouting reports on him, didn't realize that he was a switch hitter. No one had bothered to notice him during batting practice. He looked at a curveball low, then fouled off the next 2 fastballs. With 2 strikes, he shortened his stance and choked up 3 inches on the bat. The previous season, he led the Texas League with the lowest strikeout percentage of any hitter. Joe Castle was at his most dangerous, with 2 strikes. A slider missed low, then Gallagher came with the fastball away. Joe went with the pitch and slapped it hard to left center, a line drive that kept rising until it cleared the wall by 5 feet. As he circled the bases for the 3rd consecutive time, he did so with a record that seemed untouchable. No rookie had ever homered in his first 3 at-bats. So it doesn't matter, hitting from left, hitting from right, okay, he can hit a home run. Joe Castle was from Calico Rock, Arkansas, a tiny, picturesque village on a bluff above the White River on the eastern edge of the Ozark Mountains. It was Cardinals country and had been since the day of Dizzy Dean, an Arkansas farm boy and leader of the infamous Gas House Gang in the 1930s. His brother Paul, nicknamed Daffy, was also a pitcher on the same team. In 1934, at the height of the gang's fame, Dizzy predicted in spring training that he and Daffy would combine for 50 wins. They won 49, 30 for Dizzy and 19 for Daffy. 20 years later, Stan Musial, the greatest Cardinal of all, was revered to the point of being worshipped. With a radio on every front porch, the town, like countless others in the Midwest and the Deep South, followed the beloved Cardinals with a passion during the long, hot summer nights. KMOX out of St. Louis carried the game, and the familiar voices of Harry Carey and Jack Buck could be heard on every street and in every car. On July 12th, though, the dials in Calico Rock had been switched to WGN out of Chicago, and Joe's friends and family were hanging on every pitch. The Cardinals-Cub rivalry was the greatest in the National League, and though many in Calico Rock found it difficult to believe they were rooting for the hated Cubs, they were suddenly doing so, and with a fervor. In a matter of hours, they had been converted to Cubs fans. After the first home run, a crowd quickly gathered outside Evans' drugstore on Main Street. The second home run sent them into a giddy celebration, and the crowd continued to grow. When Joe's parents, 2 brothers, their wives, and their small children showed up to join the party, they were greeted with bear hugs and cheers. The 3rd home run sent the entire town into orbit. They were also celebrating in the streets and pubs of Chicago. As stunning as his first 3 at-bats had been, Joe's 4th would endear him to baseball purists forever. Top of the 9th, score tied 6-6, 2 outs, Don Kessinger standing on 3rd, a tough right-hander named Ed Raymond on the mound. As Joe stepped to the plate, a few of the 18,000 fans clapped politely, and then an odd silence settled across Veterans Stadium. Raymond's first pitch was a fastball on the outside part of the plate. Joe waited, then whipped his bat like a broomstick, crushing the ball and lining it a few inches outside the bag at first base. a foul ball, but an impressive one nonetheless. Ernie Banks, the Cubs' first base coach, did not have time to react, and if the ball had hit him, he would have been seriously maimed. Willie Montanez, the Phillies' first baseman, moved to his left, but only after the ball had caromed off the stands and was rolling into right field. Instinctively, Montanez took 2 steps back. Joe noticed this and changed his plans. The second pitch was a changeup, high. With the count 1-1, Raymond tried another fast pitch. As soon as he released it, Joe hesitated a split second, then broke for first base with his bat trailing. It tapped the ball slightly and sent it dribbling towards the second baseman, Denny Doyle, who was as startled as Raymond, Montanez, and everyone else in the stadium. By the time Doyle got to the ball, or the ball got to Doyle, Joe was 10 feet past first base and slowing down along the right field foul line. Kessinger walked home with the eventual winning run. The crowd sat in stunned silence. Players from both teams looked on in disbelief. With a chance to hit 4 home runs in a game, a feat baseball had seen only 9 times in 100 years, the kid chose instead to lay down a perfect drag bunt to score the go-ahead run. Most of those listening to the game along Main Street in Calico Rock had seen the identical drag bunt, though Joe Castle had seldom needed it. They had seen far more tape measure shots and inside-the-park home runs. His oldest brother, Charlie, who was sitting on a bench outside the drugstore, had taught him the drag bunt when he was 10 years old. He'd also taught him switch hit, steal bases, and foul off pitches that were close but not what he wanted. The middle brother, Red, had hit him a million ground balls and perfected his footwork at first base. Both brothers had taught him how to fight. "Why'd he bunt?" someone in the crowd asked Charlie. "To score the run and take the lead," Charlie replied. Plain and simple. The Cubs announcer, Vince Lloyd, and Lou Boudreau had been plowing through the record book during the game and were certain that they had their facts straight. 3 home runs in the first game of a career was a first. 4 consecutive hits in a first game tied a modern-day record, though some rookie had 5 hits back in 1894. Chicago won 7-6, and by the time the game ended, virtually every Cubs fan was tuned in. History had been made, and they didn't want to miss it. Lou Boudreau promised his listeners that he would soon have Joe wired up for a post-game interview. The crowd in Calico Rock continued to grow, and the mood was rowdy, the pride palpable. A half hour after the game was over, Lou Boudreau's voice came across the radio with, "I'm in the visitors' locker room with Joe Castle, who, as you might guess, is surrounded by reporters. Here he is." Sudden silence on Main Street in Calico Rock. No one moved or spoke. "Joe, not a bad first game. What are you thinking right now?" "Well, I would like to say hello to my family and friends back in Calico Rock. I wish you could be here. I still can't believe it." "Joe, what were you thinking when you stepped to the plate in the second inning?" "I was thinking fastball and I was swinging at the first pitch. Got lucky, I guess." "No player has ever homered in his first 3 at bat. You're in the record book." "I guess. I'm just happy to be here. This time last night, I was playing in Midland, Texas. Still hard to believe." "Indeed it is. I gotta ask you, and I know you've already been hit with this, but what were you thinking in the 9th inning? You had a chance to hit 4 home runs in a game, yet you bunted." "I was thinking about one thing, getting Don home from third for the go-ahead run. I love playing baseball, but it's no fun if you're not winning." "Well, you got a nice little streak going here. Think you can keep it up tomorrow night?" "I haven't thought about tomorrow night. Don and some of the guys were taking me out for a steak, and I'm sure we'll discuss it then." "Good luck." "Yes, sir. Thank you." Few in Calico Rock went to bed before midnight. As promised, my mother awakened me at 6 a.m. so I could watch the early morning New York news programs. I was hoping for a glimpse of Joe Castle. Channel 4 did a quick rundown on the National League games. The Mets had won in Atlanta, putting them 2 games over 500. Then there was Joe Castle sprinting around the bases in Philadelphia once, twice, 3 times. The drag bunt, though, got as much airtime as the 3 home runs. The guy could fly. My mother brought in the New York Times from the driveway. On the front page of the sports section was a black and white photo of Joe Castle and a long story about his historic debut. I found the scissors, cut it out, and started a new scrapbook, one of many I meticulously maintained. When the Mets were in town and my father was home, I was forced to save the newspapers for a few days before clipping the baseball stories. I loved it when the Mets were on the road. My father was gone, and our house was peaceful and pleasant. When he was around, though, the mood was far different. He was a self-absorbed, brooding man with seldom a kind word for any of us. He had never met his potential, and this was always the fault of someone else. the manager, his teammates, the owners, even the umpires. On the nights after he pitched, he often came home late and drunk, and that's when the trouble started. I suspected, even at the age of 11, that my parents would not stay together. He rarely called home when the Mets were away. I often thought how wonderful it would be for my father to check in after a game and talk baseball with me. I watched or listened to every Mets game and had a dozen questions. But I guess he was too busy going out with the boys. For me, baseball was a joy to play when my father wasn't watching. Because of his schedule, he rarely had the chance to see my games, and that was an indescribable relief. When he was there, though, I had no desire to play. He would lecture me on the way to the park, snarl at me during the game, and, worst of all, berate me all the way home. He even slapped me once as soon as we were driving away from the field. From the age of 7, I cried after every game my father saw me play. So we learn a lot here in this chapter about Joe and the kind of player that he is. And Joe Castle seems like a true teammate. And he is obviously very good at the game, or at least having a great season. His very first game in the major leagues, he hits 3 home runs, and he could have gone up and potentially hit a 4th. But instead, he showed his character and his willingness to be a teammate by bunting instead. So that way they could get a run home and eventually win that game. And a lot of people wouldn't do that. They'd want to go for that extra special record or just think of themselves and what it would look like if they hit another home run. But you can tell Joe's character there in what he decided to do. And that's one of the things that you want to look at when you're reading this book is the difference between Joe Castle and the narrator's father and how differently they handle situations.